Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and for everyone who's travelled from interstate, welcome to the glorious sunny Melbourne. I'm sure we'll have glorious winter Melbourne for you this afternoon or tomorrow, and we might actually get the projector up one day soon. We'll do this. Beautiful. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just quickly run through presentation, probably in three key parts. One, talk about crime generally, and then talk about the national and state perspective, then talk about the research partnership. So really building on what Nina and Jason have said or spoken about this afternoon. Certainly I agree, and I think one of the key themes coming out, probably for the whole conference is that good, accurate information and quality research is essential to making good and effective decisions within policing so that we can deliver better community outcomes. And that's what we've really focused on, making the community safe and those community outcomes. And that's one of the principal drivers of policing, which sometimes may not quite be the same as researching, but we'll bring those two together. Now, we've recently released a new strategic plan within Victoria. It's called the Victoria Police Blueprint 12 to 15. And there are the five key elements to that strategy or a strategic document. The improving community safety is where the research really fits in, and there's a number of different action areas there or outcomes we're looking for there. Certainly routinely evaluating and enhancing our interventions, knowledge captured, contributed and value added within the organisation, looking at repeat victimisation, repeat offending, minimising harm within the community, and looking at better interventions for policing. So if you're thinking about any research with Victoria Police, I strongly recommend that you get a copy of this document and read that element number 2, improving community safety. And that will help you link your research in with some of our key organisational priorities. If we talk about criminal offending, one thing that we try to always engage people is that concept of the escalation in criminal offending, where people are not normally born serious offenders. They go through a stepping stone or criminal apprenticeship. And what we really are keen to do in Victoria is to have a process with early intervention as early as possible, and a diversionary sort of process. So all your drug diversions are very, very effective. We recognise that. Having a greater range of options for early intervention diversion are things that we're really, really interested in. Because at the local level, if we can stop people that low-level, street-level offending, well, they don't become serious offenders, they have a better quality of life, and it's easier for us because we've got less work to do. I'm not saying we're lazy, by the way, but a lot easier. Because when they start getting above that local police and becoming involved in more serious criminal offending or that low-level organised crime problem, that's when crime department, we have to come out of the big building at 412 or the new location in the city, and we actually have to do something, which is really against the grain. But we have to really start helping the regions and having some dynamic interventions. And then, of course, when we start getting to that serious criminal offending, when there's starting to be a national problem, and maybe a transnational problem, well, then it becomes very, very complicated. We have to get Martin involved from the AFP and other people, and then having multi-jurisdictional investigations and multinational investigations are really problematic, especially now that travel has been cut back, so it's going to be harder to do. But as I say, if we can stop crime here at the lower level, or understand the causal factors and some of the driving factors, that's really essential for us, because that's where we want to be operating in most of the time. When we start getting up that transnational organised crime and serious offending, it's very complicated and a lot of harm in the community. So if you look at some of the breakup, some of the work we've got with the Australian Crime Commission, they've made this nice pie chart a few years ago, but they tell us that half our crime is serious crime is driven by drugs or involves drugs. A quarter is broken up in that fraud, money laundering, and then we've got about a quarter with other sort of matters. Now, I'd probably argue that a little bit. The drugs makes a lot of money. I don't recommend you get into the business. It has a custodial sentence attached to it. But if drugs are generating a lot of income, they have to wash that money somehow. So I think the money laundering is probably a lot greater than what we see on that chart there. But because we haven't actually understood it properly, we haven't understand all those money laundering techniques, how they wash the dirty money and make it into clean money and clean assets, we'd probably see that red quarter of the pie, or eighth of the pie increasing. So if that's where a lot of our time spent in, that's probably a few good areas of research that we could look at and increase our knowledge. If we look at the way we used to attack crime within Victoria was we'd pick have a key strategy for a key theme, which is all well and good for drugs, for alcohol, violence and public order types of issues and road policing, but when you're dealing with some criminal or organised criminal groups, what they do is step across those key themes, so that it's no good having an organised crime strategy if you're dealing with people who are involved in drugs, in public order, in standover, armed robbery and road policing, and they may wear a few patches on their motorbikes, but I'm not saying who they are. It's confusing for our people in the field to say, well, which strategy do I work at? What we're trying to do now is say, look, if you've got an organised crime problem, you take the key elements out of those various strategies and you have a tailored response so that you target the organised crime for all the activity they're involved in. You try to disrupt them, you try to dismantle them, and you go after their assets so that they can't reinvest in crime. So that's probably a big change for us over the last, probably I think about 18 months or so, trying to recalibrate the way we look at things. Now, as far as national strategy is concerned, the two key principal ones are the Commonwealth Organised Crime Strategic Framework and the National Organised Crime Response Plan. Once again, if you're doing research or becoming involved with us, they're two key documents. And what we've done in Victoria is align ourselves very much with the Commonwealth agenda. So we can work very closely and effectively with our AFP partners and our interstate partners. So we've used those documents, we've put them in context for Victoria, and we're achieving some great success with them. So how does that look in Victoria? Well, what we've done is from the Organised Crime Framework, or the Serious Organised Crime Framework, we've developed this model. We call it Victoria Police Serious Crime and Organised Crime Strategic Framework. Why the slight change to the serious crime? Well, because we're a state police force, we have to operate in that national, international environment, but we can't lose sight of our state and local responsibilities. So we're very much concerned about the serious crime, which is not in the national agenda. So rape and homicide may not be on that national agenda if it's not related to a national problem, but certainly here in Victoria we're very, very concerned about it. So we're trying to focus national, international as well as still local. Of course, below here we then start talking about volume crime and our need to assist the local uniformed police with tackling some other issues. So we're drawn in about 4 different directions, and I think Jason was mentioning before about limits with funds, where we're after short, sharp outcomes, very outcome focused. We don't have the luxury of time, unfortunately. So within our framework, the engine room is the tasking coordination process. And that is, whilst we might be intelligence-led, we're command-driven. So our commanders make a decision based on the information that they have. And the better information we have, better quality, but it's driven by intel or research, the better outcomes we have. The VPID, that's our new Victoria Police Intelligence Doctrine, which outlines how we put all our intel together to inform the decisions, some advice about how we prioritise issues and how we do our task coordination. And the VPCIA, it's not a bunch of Americans wearing Victoria police suits, that's our criminal investigation arrangements. Now what we've done, we used to have different policies, protocols spread throughout about 47 different documents. What we've done is bring all that together into one single document so that even we understand how we investigate stuff. And once we can understand it, we can actually engage with partner organisations and external bodies and tell them how we investigate it. So that's been a key achievement. So the bouncing balls beneath it, we've got the Serious Crime and Organised Crime Research Agenda, which I'll speak about in a moment. Thematic strategies, so that if we have an issue which is serious enough or we think is serious enough where we need a specific strategy, we'll base that around a particular crime theme. So that might be like illicit drugs, it might be alcohol-fueled violence, we've got a lot about family violence and sexual assault, those sorts of things. The Serious Crime and Organised Crime Threat Assessment. Now we've got a hierarchy of threat assessments from our national threat assessments, statewide assessments, going down to local assessments. The Serious Crime and Organised Crime Response Plan there, the set plans that we have, how we're going to engage with each other, the governance structures in place, appointing senior investigating officers, and similar things, and similarly multi-agency responses. We're very much on working with partner organisations to attack a crime problem. So we'll get a task force together with the AFP, Customs, the ASIC, the Security Commission, if we need to, depending on who the particular group is. But I'll come back to the research agenda shortly. So the response principle is very similar to the Commonwealth. Key thing, as I said before, those partnerships, task forces, intel-led, very much about that proactive intervention as well as the reactive. We have to try and balance that up. That dismantling the activity and the gangs, very important. Now, research has been telling us for many, many years that there's a small number of people responsible for a large amount of crime. So we're targeting the recidivists. We've been doing it for quite a while now. Certainly Karen's done a lot of work historically in relation to our illicit drug strategy. It's become more business as usual now. Recognising organised crime at all levels, early intervention and minimising harm. One thing you'll see us talking about more so nowadays is the concept of harm and the broader harm that crime causes within the community at the individual level, at the community level and at the national level. And that could be physical, financial, a whole range of things. When it comes to response, we've got an unplanned response. So unfortunately, when we're home in bed, normally when we're on call, we get the call about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and our partners really appreciate that as we stumble out or cancel dinners and go out to a crime scene. So we've got an unplanned response, but we've also got a planned response where it goes through a task and coordination process. And that'll be from the local level up through crime and at the state level. And task forces, we've got a number of standing task forces like our drug task force and a number of temporary ones that will stand up for an investigation. So how does that all work? Well, as the impact of the crime increases, we step up the task and coordination. We'll have different responses in place. So we've got things like in Bona, looks at local armed robbery. San Diego Task Force is a very large one about armed crime over the western suburbs. Piranha, National Organised Crime Figures. Operation Rattlesnake is where we work with the AFP and Vietnamese police to go to Vietnam and get some body smuggling of heroin coming into Australia. So that's sort of give you a bit of perspective about how we sort of operate and escalate. Now, with the research protocols, which is what we're all interested in. Now, Jason mentioned about governance before and a limited dollars. Certainly, David's area at the National Liaison Research Unit manage these to keep documents and coordinate our research, and most of you will be familiar with their work. Do a great job. Those two documents control how we do research. What we've done, though, is put together what we try to call a applied research model. One of the problems you got with police is that lasers don't work, but from the researchers are very used to working with the ASOC, the Australian Standard Offence Classification. However, you come to police and we say, what the hell? We're used to working with other things. So you see we've got a thing called CompStats where we pulled up and the head shed comes down with a big stick and whacks people if their crime figures are no good. And our crime figures are crimes against person, property, drugs and other. So what we've tried to do is marry the ASOC up to those 5 categories so that we can start speaking a similar language. Claire in the Red Jacket's done great work putting together what we call the library or research library within our centre. We're identifying research papers where we can classify them against the ASOC and against the CompStat breakdown so that we've got some papers ready so when the Assistant Commissioner or Deputy Commissioner has a good idea and comes down and says, tell me about this, we can say, okay, we can tell you straight away. So he thinks we're really smart, but we're just relying on Claire's efforts, which are very good. Added to that, we've got our LEAP, which is our criminal records database, TAS, which is how much time we spend in investigations. Our intel people monitor those when we have a spike in crime. We look at what research is out there to figure out what's going on. We also look at other strategies around Australia and internationally. So if we have to put something together, I won't say we steal other people's stuff, but we certainly get inspiration from other jurisdictions. It's a better way, it's a way to put something together consistent with world's best practice and do it very quickly. Coming down there, we've got a thing called the SCOP, or the Specialist Community of Practice. We've got key experts in key crime themes come together. What we're trying to do is get them to review research papers so we can value add that peer review process. And also putting together investigation guidelines, which are in-depth guidance for our people on how better or how they can investigate certain things. And that all feeds into specific strategies that we've got and the response plans. Now, at the end of the response plans, we do a post-operational assessment, and that's where we really see, well, from the research has told us this, we've actually acted on the research. Have we validated the research or not? And if we find out it is working, that's great. If we find it's not, well, then that goes back up into our research agenda to say, look, we need to know a bit more about this. One thing which we would like to get set up is a research forum where we can engage with the research community to say these are our problems or these are our priorities, and hopefully we can find something of interest to you. And also working with David's area to try and have a regular research forum so that we can actually, a speakers forum so that researchers can present papers. And I'm pretty sure, Nita, you might get a phone call from Claire about your research because it sounds fantastic and of great interest. So not only do we engage you and help you say, well, this is what we need, we also give you a venue where you can talk about your research and engage with practitioners because it's all about outcomes. So the difference between David's area with the strategic research agenda, very much a strategic focus. Serious crime, organised crime research agenda, very tactical for short, sharp responses. I'll just have to wrap up pretty quickly. The research agenda, it's probably more suited to a master's type program where we get over and done with in 1 or 2 semesters, as opposed to David, who'll be working more with the ARC type long-term funding and research is concerned. There's a few issues that we're interested in at the moment. We're just going through the process of reformulating our strategic agenda, which I speak to David about. So our current agenda will change. We'll inform David's, and what's left over we'll pick up on. But let's talk about the research partnership. It's just about the second last slide. Now, one of the problems we get is that police say you researchers speak funny, and the researchers say, look, we're operating in a tension space with our partners are cognitively and vocally or linguistically challenged. So how do we bridge that gap of praxis and get us all talking the same language? Well, sometimes it is challenging with our people, but the language, translating our jargon about how we speak is sometimes very novel. Sometimes, especially late at night in licensed premises, we won't go there. So don't do it again, Martin. Police language is very difficult. There's also one of the problems we have is in relation to what we can release to researchers and what we can't. Victoria, we've got a number of key restrictions. So what we'd like to do is to get in early so that if you're thinking about doing something through David's office, you can engage us at the crime department. What we'll do is sit down with you, preferably over a cup of coffee or tea, talk about what our priorities are, talk about your intended research, help you formulate the research question, your methodology, understand what we can do, and then before you put in an application, we can review the proposal a couple of times so that when it goes up to our research coordination committee, you've got a better chance of getting it through the first time. We've used that recently, and I think David will agree, and hopefully the researcher will agree. The first proposal was a bit challenging, but the final result was very good. I'm sure we're going to have a very good research project. So it is a true partnership. We have to work together. One thing is we really want to use your research to drive our practice, and we can provide you the peer review and give you that outlet to present. But if you think that your research will hopefully lead to some great community safety outcomes, I hope you see the value there. And we have to do it together because it's the community safety that we're really focused on. And that's from policing, that's what we're really counting on, as opposed to publishing or perishing. So we don't like writing stuff. So anyway, I'll leave questions to last, and thank you very much.